Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to there we are. My chair was too high. Welcome to Listen with Vobes with me, Richard Vobes, and we may well get to the end, or well, we may not. We may not. We may not get to the end. We may get to the end this week of this book. We will get to the end this week of the Thames to the Solent, but we may not quite get to the end today. I was thinking that we must be pretty close, but actually looking at it, it's still got a little further to go. Hope you are well on Tuesday, the 2nd of February, 2020. I'm just going to turn my headphones down, which are just reverberating. Not that you can see them because they're not on my head. Hello to all the lovely people out there. We've got the lovely Julia, TurboStream, Holly and Co, Billabong O'Neill, Justine Jones, Edward Moulding, Andrew Norris, Lee Lawson, Nigel Sadler, Anne H, Dave Over Yonder, Cooper68, The Green Man, Jen, as in Genevieve, Jen, Coley, or Collie, is it Coley? John F, Alan Sandell, Audrey Forbes, lovely to see you, and anybody else who happens to be passing. It's very nice to see you all. Managed to log back into my YouTube account, says Andrew Norris. Well done. Managed to get your passwords sorted out. Andrew Norris says 10 likes, 12 watching, good ratio. Excellent. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. So that's where we were. Now, as it happens, yesterday there were a few mentions. Was it yesterday? There were a few mentions, I think it was yesterday, where people were suggesting some potential books that we might read, some novels. Now, I've got some other books up on the shelf there, that authors that we've read. The Peep Show, the original version of Walter Wilkinson's, which we could do. There's a lovely book by Tickner Edwards, which I forget what it's called. Neighbourhood, it's called. That's right. But also people were suggesting a book by Fanny by Gaslight, somebody said, did they not? So happens it's on my shelf. Fanny by Gaslight by Michael Sadler. No relation to Nigel. It's quite a tome of a book because the writing is very small. And as somebody did a search, 1940s, wasn't it? But yeah, Fanny by Gaslight. Somebody else said The Scapegoat, if I remember rightly, by Daphne du Maurier. That was also on my shelf. I impressed myself, to be honest with you. I have not read this one. It needs to be read, so we could follow it up with one of these. I don't know what you think. Also, somebody suggested Lost Empires by J.B. Priestley. Well, actually, The Good Companions, and I think I said, well, that's quite a big one. I've got that on my shelf, but I didn't bring it in here. Lost Empires, the best novel Priestley the magician has written since Angel Pavement. Full of surprises inside, and that's about theatres and touring theatres and stuff. So we could, that's another one, which again I had on my shelf. So I just wanted to share that with you, that I happen to have all three of those suggestions on the shelf. However, we are reading the Thames to the Solent at the moment. You impressed your shelf. I did, Dave. I certainly did. Right, so we left ourselves down somewhere on the Thames near, not the Thames, the Arun, near Arundel. And they were going through the history of Arundel, if you remember. So I think that sort of brings us to the end of this chapter, but we will persevere through it and see how we get. Yes, Lost Empires is good too. I've read Lost Empires, and I don't mind reading it again. It was a while ago that I read it. And I admit I haven't read Fanny by Gaslight. I did read the Good Companions as well. But that takes a long time to get going, the Good Companions. Anyway, can't remember where we exactly where we got to. Somewhere around here. I thought they were upping and getting off. So I think we were here, but I'm not 100% sure. But here is a good one. There's always the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's got countryside and bypasses in it. Yes, I think that's too modern. Plus, there's a rather better radio series from 1978 that people could listen to. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And although it would be nice to be Peter Jones as the book, I didn't like the latter radio versions of it. Just when... Who was it who played the book? Dreadful. Peter Jones just is the book, and sadly he's no longer with us. The last stage of our journey to the sea now commenced. We had, as I have therefore narrated, encountered great trouble in overcoming the obstacle in the shape of gates above Arundel, and had congratulated ourselves that they were passed when we came upon a long line of them, which were, we were informed by a gentleman who helped us over the first, to continue all the way to Littlehampton. He suggested that we should try the plan generally found to answer by the bargeman, viz., to blindfold the animal, but this was no avail, and rather made matters worse. Oh my goodness. Sussex was always famous for its ingenious gates, but this three-barred arrangement beats anything one ever saw. They seemed to find favour with no one, for all whom we met abused them and gave us endless trouble. At last we discovered the quickest plan was to lead the pony to the gate, the bars being fastened down, then to lift one leg over and place it firmly on the ground on the opposite side and coax her over. By means of these and other dodges we progressed our way. The tide was strong against us, but the pony was still stronger, so we quickly went ahead. The appearance of the river now showed us we were evidently approaching the sea. Its great width, the shipping in the distance, and the number of small craft of every description dotted about, some busy fishing, some anchored, some under sail, presented a very animated appearance. Soon after passing Ford, the town began to appear, and in 20 minutes we came to the end of the towing path, which brought us into the heart of the river. We'd been cautioned against the chains of the floating bridge. Oh, and it was just at that point where the pony's good services ceased that we came upon the bridge in question. It was then about 8:30 p.m. and getting dark. The good man who minded the ferry, a thick-set, handsome fellow, and evidently a good seaman, recommended us, after hearing our story, to put up at a new little inn kept by a pal of his facing the harbour, opposite the place where we had brought up. The Beach Hotel. The great house of the place was a mile or so further on, and, as we were anxious to get our dinner as soon as possible, and to procure some information with respect to our first attempt on the high seas, as well as to get hold of a respectable sailor capable of piloting us to Portsmouth, we left our craft for the night in the charge of the ferryman, and proceeded to the little inn on the opposite side of the river. Now, just so you're aware, I am unable, because I've ordered a new keyboard, because my keyboard is dead. And I have a keyboard which I borrowed from Billy, but some of the letters don't work. So I can't type and look at things in today's show. I apologise for that. But that's all right. We'll just concentrate and get on with the talk. So, yeah, Lost Empires is good. Julia says she's had to pop away, but she's back now. Don't worry, nothing really has happened. And Good Noonie Afters says Ed was washing up, so couldn't type till now. I can't type at all, which is why my good afternoon has 2 zeros missing. Not zeros, noughts. O's. O's. No O's. It's like the Four Candles sketch, isn't it, here? The good lady of the house and her charming daughter exerted themselves to their utmost to make us comfortable. They gave us a pretty furnished sitting-room, having a bay window looking out over the harbour, from whence we could see our little ship lying at anchor amongst the schooner and cutter yachts, a proud position for her. Previous to going to dinner, I had commissioned my friend, the ferryman, to find me a pilot and to send him to me at the inn. As soon as dinner was concluded, I was informed of his presence, and he was accordingly ushered in. He appeared somewhat unsteady on his pins, and one could scarcely say that he had got sea legs. After informing him that I required some competent man to pilot us to Portsmouth, and consulting with him as to the weather and the coast, he hummed and hawed a good deal, and said that he did not much like the job, that he had been out all day fishing on Selsey Bill, and that it had been a nasty lumpy sea, which could almost be too much for our boat, and that he could not think of undertaking a voyage with a lady aboard. This did not sound very promising, particularly as the lady had no sort of intention of being left behind. So we told him that he had better think it over, and we would see how the weather looked in the morning. Later in the evening, whilst I was enjoying my nocturnal pipe, I came across the ferryman again, who thought the skipper must be an idiot, for with fair wind and tide we should only take about 6 hours to reach Portsmouth, and he said that he only wished that he could get time from his duty to go with us. In this state of uncertainty we went to roost, ordering them to call us at 6 o'clock in the morning. Dave over yonder says, just heard that Captain Tom has died. Oh, that's very sad. It's very tragic, isn't it? 100-year-old man. I'm sorry about that. Thanks for letting us know. Here's a toast to good old Captain Tom. Cheers, mate. And well done for all the things you did, including the NHS money, but, you know, all the other wonderful things he must have done in 100 years. What a shame. That'll be all on the news then. They won't leave him alone now, will they? I gather that some people were having a go at him because he went on holiday to wherever it was, not Mallorca, Barbados or somewhere. We had a nice holiday. What a shame. Steve G has arrived, as has Dudley Sawyer. Good afternoon. Bit late, couldn't find my glasses. You don't need any glasses to look at me. Actually, I need to go and get some new glasses. Julia's got a friend who works in a place, so I may have to go down there at the weekend and see if I can find some new glasses, see if it helps the reading a bit. But yeah, no, that's very sad. We're now on chapter 6. To our infinite joy, the following morning dawned as bright as its predecessors, with the wind northeast and a nice sailing breeze. Nothing could be more fortunate. We were up. I tell you why I struggle with this. It's the paragraphs are so narrow, so it's difficult to scan ahead. It's my excuse, any old excuse. Just don't tell them the truth, for God's sake. Yes, where was I? We were up betimes, thinking it probable we might find some difficulty in securing the services of a competent individual to sail us to the Solent. To our great surprise and delight, and looking from the window, we saw the little vessel's burgee flying at her masthead, and her mainsail partly set, which proved that the skipper, having slept over his stern decision the night before, had made up his mind to sail with us after all. We now dispatched the groom and pony to their destination by road, a distance of about 40 miles, having no further need of their services. We no longer need you. You may now go. Thank you. After breakfast, we set to work to procure refreshments in case we might require them, and to repair any little losses we had sustained en route. An hour sufficed to put all in order, and at 9 a.m. we weighed anchor and proceeded to beat out of the harbour. Under the lighthouse there was a little broken sea, which made us think we should catch it outside. But the boat was so buoyant and behaved so well that we did not ship a drop of water. After, I just had to double check that's what he said. We did not ship a drop of water, but that is what he said. After proceeding about 2 miles out to procure an offing, we laid our course parallel with the shore. The breeze was steady and fresh, and we spun along with a fair tide at about 8 knots an hour. A sense of freedom and rest stole over us as we bounded merrily over the waves, delighted at the successful performance of the boat, which more than answered our expectations, and we were but too glad that we were but too glad we had not put back at Bramley. No more locks to open, no more aggravating gates to pass. Nothing to prevent me lying down on my plaids and smoking my pipe at peace, while the winds and the waves did all the work for us. Our trip by canal had been quite charming, but rather hard work, and after 4 days' labour, we were glad of the change. We soon passed the towns of Middleton and Bognor, with their esplanades and white-fronted houses, lighted up by the sun and giving Pagham Harbour a wide berth. We steered a little out to weather the point of Selsey Bill. In process of time, we arrived at the point, a bleak wild shore, bearing most unmistakable the marks of ravages of storm and tempest. In the earlier Saxon times, Selsey was peopled by a heathen race who lived from hand to mouth as best they could. This district was granted by the king of Bishop Wilfrid, who founded the see, since removed to Chichester, and built a cathedral and monastery there. On his arrival, he found the people in sad distress, for Bede tells us that they had no rain for 3 years and were plunged into the most abject poverty, destroying themselves in numbers to avoid starvation. On the first day of baptism, however, the rain fell heavily, and the aspect of affairs changed for the better. There is, at present, no trace whatever of the cathedral or the monastery, all, no doubt, having been destroyed by the inroads of the sea. The anchorage to the east of the Bill, still called the Park, was stocked with deer in the days of bluff King Hal, and many a good haunch of venison found its way, no doubt, to the table of the monastery. The village of Selsey is about 1/2 mile from the shore. How long will that stand? Who can tell? On rounding the point, we espied the distance of the Channel fleet in boteous order ranged. I guess that's a nautical term, is it? Beauteous order ranged. It was the most imposing sight, these magnificent ships, all getting up their steam for a rehearsal preparatory to the grand review. We unanimously decided to sail out of our course in the direction of St. Helens Roads, where the fleet lay anchor. It was not long before we reached them, and it was a grand sight to see them get under way with the greatest possible precision and glide through the sea, side by side, almost without one's being aware that they were in motion. We watched their evolutions for some time. Evolutions. We did watch it. I've lost my space. We watched their evolutions for some time and perceived that one of the ironclads had carried away her jib boom, and appeared to us that she had been already engaged with the enemy. Our attention was so wrapped up in the movements of the fleet that we had not noticed that the wind had been freshening to a very great extent, and that we had left the shore about 14 miles astern, the sea, in the meantime, having risen considerably. It therefore became necessary for us at once to shape our course for Portsmouth, and in order to do so, we must jib the sail. The skipper, unaccustomed to boats of this rig, appealed to me to say how this was to be done, with such a strong breeze then blowing. I informed him that I was as wise as he, for this was my first trip to sea in the Caprice. I told him I thought we had nothing to fear if we jibbed the sail carefully. He, however, on consideration, thought it would be safer to stay her, considering the large size of the single sail. I was very doubtful as to the advisability of this course, for in coming round we must present a broadside to the rollers, which were running high at the time, and if then by accident shipped a sea, the possibilities were that we would be swamped, added to which I had always been told that the Una boats were good for nothing in a seaway. Nevertheless, I yielded to the superior knowledge of the skipper, and we went about. She came round very gamely, rising like a duck in the waves. Before, however, we could put her before the wind, a great roller charged us broadside, breaking over her and giving us a good dunking, which obliged us to set course and bail out. We now went ahead at great pace towards Portsmouth, the rollers threatening to poop us all the time, but we were going too fast for them, and at about 2 p.m. we dropped anchor in front of Southsea Pier. Blimey. Joseph says, Julia says, Joseph is kissing your face on my phone, Richard, just to let you know he loves and misses you tons. Bless his little socks of cottonness. I must pop round and see him, or we must meet, socially distanced and all of that. Heaven just gained a hero, says Ed. Yes, indeed. Cheers to old Tom. I'd like to live to 100, though. Wouldn't that be nice? I think it'd be lovely. As long as you've got your, as fit as he was, it would be great. We landed in a shore boat, which came out to us, and having discharged our pilot, we proceeded at once to the Queen Hotel, where we did ample justice to a good luncheon, after which we started for Cumberland Fort to visit some friends quartered there. They very kindly showed us over the new barracks built for the Marine Artillery. Nothing can be more perfect than their arrangement. A large area is covered in under the troops drill, under which the troops drill in bad weather, leading into which all round us are the several rooms appropriated to the use of the officers and men. Reading rooms, libraries, mess rooms, billiard and gymnastic rooms, lecture rooms, etc., etc., as comfortable and as snug as a London club. The dormitories, the lavatories, wash houses, all in the most perfect style. Indeed, the wonder is that every man who enlists does not join the Royal Marine Artillery. The houses appropriate to the married officers are as yet not finished. We were told that each would have a house to himself when ready. They face the sea and are built upon open drill ground of the regiment. We were shown guns mounted in every position for gun drill, one of which was placed upon a stage and made to rise and fall by means of machinery to imitate the motion of the vessel at sea. The men have also their outdoor amusements for any of them who wish to... The men have also their outdoor amusements. For any of them who wish it, they may try their hands at horticulture and have a small plot each allotted to him for that purpose. We walked through these little gardens, and it was curious to see the British Marines, dressed in their uniforms, hard at work, digging and raking their respective plots. I imagine Sean James Cameron would be interested. Is Sean James Cameron out there today? At 5:30, we left the fort, accompanied by our friends who were anxious to see us off and to have a look at the Caprice. The fort is 3 miles from the pier, so it took us nearly half an hour to get there. Wait a minute. The average speed of walking is 3 miles an hour. So they must have been walking at 6 miles an hour. That's with friends at 5:30? That doesn't sound right, does it? They must have jogged down there. On our way, we came in for a beautiful sight. The fleet, which we'd watched in the morning, manoeuvring under steam, was now returning to Spithead under full press of canvas, which had a very grand effect, and was excessively interesting to watch as these great ships drop into their respective place and then at once come to anchor. We were put aboard our little craft by a shore boat, and we were soon off again on our way to Ryde. Of course, our course lay straight through the fleet, and we delayed some time cruising in and out to obtain a nearer view of some of them. Imagine, I don't suppose they would let you do that now, would you, if you were zipping about on a tiny little boat past the big Navy ships? I'm sure there'd be somebody going, "Oi, you there, get out of it!" Any problems, Seaman Vobes? No, sir. I've just dealt with potential boarders. We had tickets to admit us on board one of the Peninsular and Oriental steamers, chartered by the government of the day. But as the weather on that occasion did not permit the fleet performing any evolutions, I wonder what an evolution is. We saw it to much greater advantage on this day, though nothing could be grander than the splendid cannonade which took place at the review. Nigel Sadler says, according to Google, it's only 2 miles. Yeah, that's better. That's why it only took them half an hour. He's a bit of a liar, this bloke. No idea of his measurements. The ships were anchored in 2 parallel lines, the wooden on one side and the ironclads on the other. The wooden ships looked by far the most formidable, although there was a rakish kind of aspect to the ironclads, as though they did not intend to be trifled with, suggestive of the maxim that might gives right. There was an ironclad, wasn't there, in H.G. Wells's The War of the Worlds, and the Martians in their tripods are sort of shooting at them. The wind had now gone down, and there was a pleasant light breeze with a calm sea. The scenes were very animated. Boats of all sorts of sizes scattered about in every direction, steamers, steam launches, and rowboats, all passing round and about the fleet, parties going on board and parties leaving the ship, with beautiful yachts of every rig, their snow-white sails lifting up the scene as far as the eye could reach. It was now getting late, so we stood straight across for Ryde, which we were not long in reaching. A perfect fleet of yachts lay at anchor off the pier, and steamers from every part were busy disgorging their passengers, whilst the escaping steam kept up a continuous hiss and roar. We soon brought up to the westward of the pier, and a boat came to us which conveyed us ashore. We proceeded in due course to the Kent Hotel, where we were fortunate enough to procure rooms and a dinner. One wonders whether he was an ex-policeman standing in the dock. And then what happened, Constable? Well, my lord, we proceeded in due course to the Kent Hotel, where we were fortunate enough to procure rooms and a dinner. Because policemen only proceed, don't they? That's all they ever do. They never, we went down the road and looked at the house. We proceeded down Acacia Avenue, in case you're asking, and we looked at the house. It doesn't say they were walking, though, says Lee Lawson. That may be true. I wonder how maybe they went by some dog cart or something. I thought he did say they walked. Did they not say he walked? It took us half an hour. 3 miles to the pier. Oh yeah, maybe. It's earlier. It says we walked through the little gardens. At 5:30 we left for the fort. Yes, they must have gone in a little dog cart or some such thing. Charles Parsons, who invented the steam turbine, did that in his boat turbiner, is it? At the Spithead. Review in the late Victorian era. Royal Navy couldn't catch him. Queen Victoria loved it though. Nigel Sadler says it's interesting to note that Cumberland Fort is not marked at all on the 1900 map. Obviously still a military secret. Kayaked, says Edward Moulding, from Carshot to Cows once. Casshot, is it? Sorry, looking up from here and looking at it, so I need some new glasses, I think. It's all this reading. Wrecks your eye, you know. I hope they do give me a good discount when I go to get some new glasses, because I only need one lens, really. But they'll stitch me up. I know this. Oh, yes, you need a balancing lens. That could be glass. Just could be a piece of glass. Bit of perspex. Be all right. A little bit of cling film will do it, won't it? Anyway, we proceeded. Oh, yes, we proceeded. The greater part of this evening I spent finding a sailor. Oh, aye. Now the truth is coming out. Oh, the greater part of this evening I spent in finding a sailor to go with us on the morrow to our destination at Christchurch. Since I've been there some years back, the bar at the entrance to the harbour has shifted considerably, and but few of the Solent men knew anything of the place. In fact, they all looked upon that coast with dread, it being a lee shore. Sandy Shore? Didn't she sing? Was it Sandy Shore who sang Puppet on a String? The town was crowded to repletion in consequence of the coming review, and the taps, the favourite resorts of the sailors, were in the most uproarious state. I had great difficulty in getting hold of anyone who knew the coast, and when I succeeded, the men preferred to obtain their fancy prizes at Ryde to going on a cruise. Others were so disgracefully inebriated as to be unable to talk sense. At last I got hold of a man who, though thoroughly intoxicated, was just able to make himself intelligible, and I thought perhaps that by morning he might sober down and answer our purpose. Blimey. You can just imagine this Dashwood chap going into these old rough and sailors' places and trying to find someone. You, sir, would you help me? Trying to get our little ship over to the so-and-so. One morning. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I know, I kiss my... I love you. I love you. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. What about you? But what about me? Are you, could you think you would sober up in the morning and sail us over to such and such? Yes, I dare say. I dare say I could. I dare say I couldn't. I don't... Who are you again? Not quite sure what he was trying to do, actually. I've lost what he was actually trying to get these people to do. But anyway, we will ascertain in due course. He hoped that he might sober down and answer our purpose. He was accordingly engaged and ordered to be on the pier at 8 a.m. the next day. I'd like to engage you 8 a.m. the next day, all right? Yes, 8 a.m. the bell. I wonder if he turns up. The evening, sad to say, looked anything but promising. The wind had not changed, but the thick, wet mist had set in, and we retired for the night, not without the gravest misgivings. At 6 the next morning, I popped my head out of the window, and sad to say, our worst anticipations were realised. It was a downpour, a dead calm, and a southwest wind. How is it with you? Our only solace was that we should have had the tide with us, which had not yet begun to ebb. It was clear that we should now. It was clear. It was quite clear. Just read the words, Phobes. Okay. It was quite clear that we should not now be able to get to Christchurch that night, but if we could reach Lymington, we might possibly proceed by train, leaving our boat within easy reach of home. We found the skipper waiting for us at the entrance to the pier, and were soon again on board, but not a breath of air was to be felt, and the burgees hung from the mastheads of the various yachts anchored in the roads in the most melancholy manner. We paddled and drifted along with the tide, listening to the skipper, who was busy spinning yarns about himself and his belongings. It's his anchor to the 7 seas. Sinbad, Sinbad, I tell you, Sinbad. He was a rough diamond, and his language was not the most refined. I'd seen it, of course he did. Among other tales, he told us of an amusing sell played upon him by his mother, who had been in the habit of finding fault with him for stealing her lucifer matches to light his pipe. She had had to resort to every artifice in her power to protect them. She had hid them away, but he always managed to find them again, and she was in despair. One fine morning, when he was about to start on a long cruise, he discovered to his great delight a new box full of matches, half of which he clapped into his pocket, saying to himself, meanwhile, "See here, mother. See here, mother's forgot I'd her matches this morning. I take it she'll miss a few when she comes to light the fire." Off he sets in great glee, and when some distance from land he bethinks himself a pipe would be comforting, having loaded his clay, with a chuckle he produces the matches in question, and to use his own words, "I goes scrape, 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 one after t'other. But it were no good. It were no good, the tarnation things wouldn't light. So I knows it was a trick, my mother's, and when I gets home that night, mind ye, not having had a pipe all day, I finds they strike fast enough on mother's box, but nowhere else. And I'm blessed if it wasn't the queerest kind of match I've ever seen." Obviously, these were safety matches, I presume. Early safety matches that he'd picked up instead of the ones that you could... I light my pipe on a seaman's chest. Row, ho, ho, on a double of fin. The weather now began to thicken to windward, and a strong breeze worked up from the westward, against which we had to beat with the aid of the tide. It was not long before the glassy surface of the sea wore a stormy aspect, and there seemed every prospect of dirty weather setting in. The wind and tide being contrary, a nasty, rough sea rose, through which we rounded Castle Point at Cowes, and began to think it would be prudent to bring up there. But as time was our abject, we determined to hold on as long as we could, for hitherto we had got along famously. The wind, after leaving Cowes, moderated a little, and the sea, in duty bound, followed suit, and the rain ceased, and we actually had a glimpse of the sun. These favourable circumstances tended greatly to encourage us, and the little ship ploughed along manfully through the waves. As I have before narrated, we were complete novices in the art of working these Una rig boats, and the sailors we took on board as pilots were no wiser than ourselves. The result was that our reef tackle was all out of order, and we were forced to hold on under a full sail. Thus we continued on our way, making the best use of the ebb tide. The tides in the Solent were most puzzling, and it is very necessary to engage a local man as pilot unless great experience has already been acquired. The eddy tides, if artfully taken advantage of, are the greatest assistance, as it proved every year at the regatta. We continued to beat along under the shore of the Isle of Wight for a short distance further, when we made a board across the northern shore in order to get the ebb tide out of the Southampton water. At about 3 p.m. We were nearing Lymington Creek, and the weather by now had become very stormy. The larger yachts had taken the precaution to shorten sails, but alas, we could not do so. We were obliged to hold on, all sails standing. The tide had now turned against us, and in order to enter the river, we were obliged to round a point known as Jack in a Basket, beating against wind and tide. A nasty chopping sea had risen, which broke over and into us without mercy, obliging us to keep constantly bailing out, and every time we went about, we had to shift the luggage, etc., windward. In the process of time, we got round the point and ran up the river at a great rate, the skipper steering by means of the mainsheet as much as with the tiller, and at about 4 o'clock we dropped anchor in Lymington Harbour. The skipper, as said before, was a crusty sort of fellow.
A crusty sort of fellow. What kind of term is that? I will be reading your book, you know. I will be reading it.
And he quarrelled with everyone who offered to lend us assistance or give us any information. One young sailor came up to me and, in passing some remarks about the Caprice, pointed out another larger vessel which had originally been built as a uniboat, but a small bowsprit or bumpkin had since been added to enable her to carry a jib. In alluding to her, he remarked, "That's a nice uniboat, sir." Upon which our skipper turned upon him without mercy, and the following dialogue took place. "You can call a uniboat. You call that a uniboat, do you? Perhaps you call yourself a seaman next." "Yes," said the lad, "I calls her a uniboat."
"How can she be a uniboat with 2 sails, you stupid fella?"
answers the skipper. "Anyway, she was built for one," rejoined. Anyway, she was built for one," rejoined the youngster. "D'ye call that the same thing?" says the skipper. "I was built for a gentleman, but I ain't one." The weather had by this time worked itself up into a gale, and craft of all rig came staggering into harbour under close-reefed canvases. This put an end to our further attempt to get to Christchurch. Alas, if only fine weather had held on a few hours longer, we still would have accomplished what we undertook, namely the voyage from Weybridge to the Solent by canal and sea, and we were now compelled to bid adieu to our present little ship, whilst we took the train from Lymington to Christchurch. Little wacka-wacka noise, just for the lovely Julia. At this point, I ought to thank my readers for their perseverance in pursuing this little tale. I only trust that it may have proved amusing to some. I am sure that it is suggestive of enterprise to those who are fond of sailing, and to those who possess a small sailing boat, and having a few weeks' holiday from their daily work in London, may like to run down to the sea beyond the immediate precincts of London and the Thames without much expenditure of either time or money. And then we're on chapter 5, 6, 7. Is this his... he does a discourse on rigging out... Oh, yes, this is... The last bit is his... is not really the story. It's the business about the Una rig and the management of the Una boat. Its great advantages as compared to blah, 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 which I think is going to be boring for all of us because it's all about seamanship and how the boat was sent out. So I think we will call that done. It's done, mate. It's done. You've been done, I'll tell you. So, there we are. How do you think about that? Reminds me, says Alan Sandell, of a sailing holiday in the Channel. How the three of us survived, I do not know. Ooh. Dudley Sawyer says, I lost my car in Portsmouth for 5 hours. What do you mean you lost it? Did it fall off a ferry or something? Should read Carl shot, says Edward. Carl shot. Oh, okay. Good afternoon, gentlefolk, says Mike Stevens. Good afternoon to you, sir. Typical night out on the South Sea. Looks like the tale is nearing the end. I think we have actually come to the end now. Ben Reeve says Union Street in Plymouth was the local battlefield in Plymouth on a Friday night. Royal Navy and Marines from one end of town and students from the other, all meeting in the middle. Oh, yes, I bet that was a bit of a battlefield. Dave over yonder likes the Lucifers, the old matches. Lee Lawson says it was amusing, all right, but it was the Vobes who made it funny. I hope I didn't make it too silly for you. Reminds me of a sailing holiday in the Channel. Oh, yes, I read that. Obviously changed at Brockenhurst. Oh, obviously changed at Brockenhurst. Well read, of course. And thank you, Richard. That was very good. Ready for another. Don't break a tooth. Oh, yes. I'll try not to, Anne. And thanks for the reading. What next? So, yes, that is the question. What next? Has anybody got any other suggestions? So we have got the potential of novels, as in pucker novels. We've got Fanny by Gaslight, if you're up for it. Lost Empires by J.B. Priestley. Daphne du Maurier, The Scapegoat, which I have no idea what it's about. I mean, they are quite long. They are going to be quite lengthy. Oh, hello, look at that. Simple as that. All you have to do is pay them by direct debit. I haven't read this, so it's funny what you find in old books, isn't it? What's this? I don't know what that is. That's a funny thing to leave in a book. Fanny by Gaslight. September Books. Church Stretton. Oh, must be where I got it from. Maybe. A picture book next time. Not enough waffle. Great reading. Thanks, Richard. Yes, we must get some more waffle in there. The other options are... there's some other authors that I have got here lined up. So, the other options here... Hang on. Bear with me, caller. Blimey. So the other options are these. The Peep Show, Walter Wilkinson's first and original book, where he goes down into Devon, which we know will be delightfully written because we know him. But we have read one of his. The other one is Neighbourhood by Tickner Edwards, which is local to Burpham. And... does have a few pictures in it, just to keep Ed happy. But I don't know if it's a story or whether... I think it's just like a diary of events. Not sure. But we know he writes well. And then we did do R. Thurston Hopkins. I can't remember what the name of the book was that we did. Oh, yes, I can. The Lure of Sussex. And he's got Sussex Pilgrimages. I mean, I appreciate these are all in Sussex, of course. So this is sort of, I suppose, a bit of a... probably not such a good thing. There are some other books by Norman Collins, which I'd have to find. London Belongs to Me is a terrific book, but again, that's quite long. And I think somebody said they're already reading it now, but that's a good one. Or we've got these three, or whatever you damn well fancy. The Man in the Iron Mask. I think I've got that on my shelf as well. Funnily enough. I prefer non-fiction. I enjoy Googling the places and buildings, says John F. Audrey, the story is quite chilling and fascinating. Which story are we talking about? Though The Scapegoat is about two men who look alike and swap identities. Is it? More puppets. Walter Wilkinson. That seems to be what people are going for. So shall we... More puppets. What about smuggling? But I would say that, I guess, Ed Loud. I haven't got any smuggling books. So are we going to do the Peep Show? The original Peep Show? Is that what we're going to do? Something regional, maybe something from up north. I haven't got anything from up north. I can put those back on my shelf. I really enjoyed the fiction, but of course I'll listen to those reading the telephone directory, says Julia. Ha ha ha. What pages? Set in France, if I remember. What's set in France? Oh, what, The Scapegoat. I tell you, I'm not suggesting that we do this. Then Walter Wilkinson. I'm not suggesting we're doing this, but as we couple of minutes, I'm just going to read the first couple of paragraphs and see what happens. 1957. I left the car by the side of the cathedral, and then walked down the steps to the Palais des Jacobins. Yeah, there'd be a lot of bad French in this book if I was to read it. It was still raining hard. It had not once let up since Tours, and all I had seen of the countryside I loved was the gleaming surface of the Route Nationale, rhythmically cut by the monotonous swing of the windscreen wiper. Outside Le Mans, the depression that had grown upon me during the last 24 hours had intensified. It was inevitable always driving the last days of holiday, but this time, more than ever, I was aware of time having passed too swiftly, not because the days had been over full, but because I had achieved nothing. The notes I had written for the lectures I was to give during the coming autumn were scholarly, precise, with dates and facts that I should otherwise dress up the language designed to strike a spark in the dull minds of attentive students. But even if I held their flagging interest for the brief half hour, I knew, when I had finished, that nothing I said to them was be of any value, and I had only given them images of history, brightly coloured, waxwork models, puppet figures strutting through a charade. The meaning of history would have escaped me because I had never been close enough to people. It was all too easy to lose oneself in the past half an hour, half imagined, and be so blind to the present. In the cities that I knew best, Tours, Blois, Orleans, I lost myself in... Anyway, I don't think I could read that really effectively. I have no idea. It's a lecturer going off to a thing. Daphne Moore, her grandpa was an illustrator for Punch magazine. Oh. Yes, The Scapegoat set in France. That would be probably difficult for me. So, a puppet show Cooper. Choose one with a good clear font so it doesn't strain your eye. That's a good one. I still have a telephone directory. One of the really thick ones. You've got a very thick one here. Large font. Who's got the largest font? Imagine at the on BBC Radio 4, book at bedtime. And tonight's book at bedtime has been chosen from the book with the largest font. It's called Baptize My Baby and My Mother, My Father and My Sister. The reason being they have the largest font. And they can all swim in... Oh, it's a bad joke. It's a bad joke. So a peep show then. Shall we give that a go? Shall we give it a go? We'll start this tomorrow. Of course, we could improve this show so I don't make so many blunders if I was to read silently. For an hour, and you just sit there and watch me sniggering and laughing. Oh, that would never happen. No, you're making that up, aren't you? That is the improvement to the show, of course, but I wouldn't subject you to anything quite so decent. Anyway, we'll go for it. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Peep show. So there we go. Anyway, we've done the Thames to the Solent, which is marvellous. Thank you very much, Lee Lawson, for purchasing that book and sending it to me. That was very kind of you. All good fun. We looked at all the pictures on it. There was only a few pictures, but you know, nice little book, and it's interesting to think that it's interesting to think that we read it. Ed Loud says, my mum has to read very, very large font. She had a brain hemorrhage and is losing her eyesight. I'm so proud of her. And now how she copes. And she's now listening. I hope she's not listening to me. Linda Kane says, you read silently and we'll all have our own copy. Yeah, there we are. That's a bit of I bet you'll all finish before me that way. Nigel Sadler says, we could always talk among ourselves. Oh, wait, we do that already. Yeah, that's it. Used to enjoy tearing directories in half. Oh, yes. You've got to break the spine, haven't you? Looking forward to the new book. Grand. All right. Well, I will see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for coming along today. It's been good fun. Glad we finished another book. We're going to have to make a list of all these books, aren't we? Because we're cracking through them. Anyway, take care. Have a good one. Lovely to see you, and catch up with you tomorrow. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.